the unseen depths. The name refers not only to a place, but to a state of mind. It is, of course, the physical abyss, the crushing, silent, eternal dark of the deep ocean, a realm that has swallowed history whole and guarded its secrets with unimaginable pressure. For centuries, this darkness has been a tomb for ships, for fortunes, and for the countless stories lost with them. But the title also speaks to a different kind of void, the intellectual blind spots that have guided our search. It refers to the clues we failed to see, the questions we never thought to ask, and the assumptions that led generations of explorers astray. It is the story of a truth hidden not by water and silt, but by our own limited perception. For years, countless expeditions explored these depths, drawn by the siren song of legend. They came with advanced submersibles, with side-scan sonar, with magnetometers tuned to the promise of iron hulls and cannons. They were searching for treasure, for answers, for history. Their charts were filled with the ghosts of Spanish galleons, the rumored resting places of imperial cargo, and the final known coordinates of warships lost to forgotten storms. Each dive was a multi-million-dollar gamble, a high-stakes hunt for a glorious, tangible prize. They followed the old stories, the shipping manifests, the well-worn narratives of what be down there. But they were all looking for the obvious. Their search was defined by a confirmation bias as deep as the water itself. They sought the clear outline of a wreck, the glint of gold, the unmistakable shape of a historical artifact they already expected to find. Their powerful lights cut narrow paths through the gloom, but their focus was even narrower. Anything that didn't fit the profile of a lost ship or its cargo was dismissed as geological noise, as corrupted data, as irrelevant debris. The ocean floor is a chaotic landscape of natural and man-made detritus. And in the hunt for a clear signal, the subtle whispers of the truth were systematically filtered out. They missed the subtle truth. They sailed right over it, scanned it a dozen times, and never saw it for what it was. Because the truth wasn't a shipwreck. It wasn't a chest of gold. It was an anomaly. A single, persistent detail that defied every known category. A pattern where there should be randomness. A shape that had no business being there, nestled in the silt for centuries, waiting for someone to ask a different kind of question. They missed the one thing that would expose everything. The single piece of evidence that didn't just add a new chapter to the history books, but threatened to force an entirely new volume. A discovery that would prove the most profound secrets are not always the largest, but the ones we are least prepared to comprehend. This was different. The pressure wasn't just the crushing weight of the water column, a familiar companion on 100 previous descents. It was the weight of history, of decades of failed searches and forgotten theories. Down here, in the silent, frigid dark, the mission had distilled to its purest form. One diver, one last chance. The final sweep of a grid that had yielded nothing but disappointment. The sonar had been corrupted by thermoclines, the magnetometers confused by volcanic rock, and the historical maps, it seemed, were more folklore than fact. Every expedition before had chased the grand prize, the hull, the treasure, the obvious centerpiece of the wreck. They had all been drawn to the largest debris fields, the most dramatic magnetic signatures, the places where a catastrophe was supposed to look like a catastrophe. But the truth, if it existed at all, wasn't in the wreckage. It was in the space between. It was in the anomaly. The strategy was a departure from every doctrine of underwater archaeology. It was a hunt not for objects, but for patterns that defied nature. The diver's eyes weren't scanning for gold or cannons, but for the subtle tells of something manufactured, something alien to this environment. A patch of sand where the current's ripples were unnaturally disturbed. A faint metallic sheen where only organic matter should be. A perfectly straight line in a world defined by chaotic flowing curves. It was an exercise in seeing past the noise, of training the brain to ignore 99% of the visual information and lock onto the single discordant note. Moving beyond the obvious, searching for the anomaly. The minutes bled into the cold, each exhale a cloud of precious time dissolving into the gloom. The search pattern was nearly complete. Hope was a flickering ember about to be extinguished by the encroaching dark and the insistent logic of a failed mission. And then, the light hit it. It wasn't a dramatic reveal. It was a flicker, a momentary hesitation in the rhythmic sweep of the beam. The diver's light, which had painted 1,000 unremarkable rocks and silt drifts, caught an edge that was too clean, a curve too perfect. It was a shape that had no business being here, an impossible piece of geometry nestled in the organic chaos of the seabed. The diver froze, the sound of their own breathing suddenly roaring in their ears. Slowly, deliberately, the beam traced the outline. It wasn't part of a ship's hull. It wasn't a barrel hoop or a piece of rigging. Its form was entirely inconsistent with any known component of the target wreck, or any wreck from that era. Partially buried, overlooked by generations of explorers, was a single, undeniable piece of evidence. With a gloved hand, the diver brushed away a layer of fine silt, a delicate plume unfurling like smoke. The sediment had been its cloak, a blanket of obscurity that had guarded it from every sonar pulse and remote camera that had passed this way before. As the particles cleared, they revealed not the rust of iron or the patina of bronze, but something else entirely. A series of precise, deliberate markings were carved into its surface. They were not letters from any known alphabet, nor were they simple decorative flourishes. They were intricate, geometric, and utterly alien to the historical context of the search. This was the crucial detail everyone had missed. This was the signal in the noise. It wasn't treasure, it was something far more valuable. A question. A single, tangible object that invalidated decades of assumptions and pointed toward a narrative far stranger than anyone had dared to imagine. A detail that reset the entire mystery. Down here, in the crushing silence of the abyss, time itself seems to dissolve. The only metronome is the steady rhythmic pulse of your own breathing, a mechanical heartbeat in a world devoid of life as we know it. For hours, our diver, a lone phantom in the deep, had been executing the grid search. A painstaking, methodical sweep of a sector deemed low probability by every previous expedition. The sonar had shown nothing but silt and scattered debris, the usual detritus of the sea. But our mission wasn't to follow the obvious. It was to hunt for the anomaly, the whisper of a detail that history had forgotten to record. We were searching for the unseen. The beam of the torch cut a swathe through the particulate haze, illuminating a monotonous landscape of sand and shadow. Each pass was a study in patience, training the eye to dismiss the natural and isolate the unnatural, a flicker of unnatural symmetry, a reflection that didn't belong, a line too straight to be carved by currents alone. This was the discipline, to look past the ghost of a galleon, to ignore the siren song of sunken treasure that had lured so many others to this very spot, only to leave them with empty hands and emptier logs. They were all looking for the wreck. We were looking for the reason the wreck was here. And then, a hesitation. A subtle catch in the smooth sweep of the light. The beam snapped back, locking onto a point of interest. It was almost nothing. A corner, an edge, barely protruding from the sediment that had entombed it for generations. It wasn't the glint of precious metal. It wasn't gold. The texture was wrong, the color muted under the high-intensity lamp. It was stone, or something like it, but its presence here, miles from any known quarry and thousands of feet below the waves, was a geological impossibility. With painstaking care, gloved fingers began to brush away the accumulated layers of time. Silt, fine as dust, billowed away in ghostly clouds, caught in the torchlight like a miniature nebula. As the form emerged, a quiet thrill, cold and sharp, cut through the deep. This was no random rock. It possessed a deliberate, alien geometry. The curves were too perfect, the angles too precise. It didn't belong to the skeletal timbers of the nearby wreck, whose rotting forms were a familiar, almost comforting sight. This was something other. It wasn't just another wreck. The diver steadied the camera, the lens becoming an extension of our own eyes. And as the light shifted, the shadows fell into place, revealing what they had concealed. Engravings. a complex lattice of symbols and lines, unlike any known maritime markings or decorative carvings. They were not the crude marks of a shipwright or the heraldry of a European power. This was a language, elegant and complex, etched with a confidence that spoke of a master's hand. In that moment, the cold of the deep was forgotten, replaced by the incandescent heat of discovery. This was the truth, a forgotten artifact that confirmed a long-lost civilization, or perhaps the secret fate of a famous figure. The mind raced, connecting this tangible piece of evidence to a dozen whispered legends and historical footnotes. Was this a marker, a celestial map, or a record of a journey that defied our understanding of the past? The iconography was baffling, hinting at astronomical knowledge and a grasp of mathematics that seemed centuries ahead of its time. It was a Rosetta Stone without a key, a message from a ghost. This single, undeniable object recontextualized everything. The wreck was no longer the story, it was a footnote. The currents, the magnetic anomalies, the missing logs from prior voyages, it all began to coalesce around this new, unbelievable center of gravity. This was the crucial piece of the puzzle, missed for centuries, now undeniable. It had been hiding in plain sight, dismissed as debris, ignored by those blinded by the promise of gold. As the diver gently worked it free from its silty prison, a final, definitive seal was revealed on its underside, a maker's mark that answered one question only to pose 1,000 more. This dive exposed what everyone overlooked. It proved that the greatest treasures are not always made of gold, and the most profound truths are often found not in the answers we seek, but in the questions we never thought to ask. The unseen depths had finally given up one of their secrets. The depths held the secret. The dive revealed it. A single moment, a crucial detail, exposed the truth everyone missed. And with it, history has been rewritten. Please subscribe to our channel History Documentary Hub for more insightful videos and intriguing content.